Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.
Carmen Hale stood at the kitchen window, watching Grant load camping gear into their SUV. The September morning sun painted the Flagstaff Mountains gold, but she felt cold inside. 9 years of marriage, and her husband still moved like a stranger through their shared life. "You forgot the sleeping bags," she called through the screen door. Grant looked up, sweat already beading his forehead despite the cool air. "Right. Thanks." He jogged back inside, brushing past her without meeting her eyes. Carmen studied his face as he grabbed the bags from the hall closet. 41 years old, but Grant carried himself like a man who expected to be hit. His shoulders curved inward. His voice never rose above a careful middle tone. "The Millers are excited about this weekend," Carmen said. "Yeah." Grant hefted the bags. "Should be fun." Should be. Never would be. Carmen had learned to read the careful distance in his words. 9 years, and Grant still spoke to her like she might leave if he said the wrong thing. The phone rang. Grant jumped, dropping one of the sleeping bags. "I'll get it," Carmen said. "No." Grant's voice sharpened. "I mean, it's probably for me. Work stuff." He grabbed the phone from the counter. Carmen watched his face change as he listened. His jaw tightened. His free hand curled into a fist. "I can't talk now," he said into the receiver. "Tonight, after dinner." Grant hung up and forced a smile. "Ready to go?" Carmen nodded, but questions crawled through her mind. In her old life, before Grant, before Flagstaff, before she buried her past under 9 years of backyard barbecues and hiking boots, she would have pushed. She would have demanded answers. But that woman was gone. Wasn't she? The camping trip passed in familiar patterns. Grant made small talk with their friends, the Millers. He laughed at Tom Miller's jokes. He helped Karen Miller set up her tent. But when he thought no one was watching, his face went blank. Empty. Everything okay with Grant? Karen asked Carmen by the campfire Saturday night. Carmen watched her husband stare into the flames. "He's been stressed at work. The construction business is tough right now." Karen poked the fire with a stick. "Tom's worried about layoffs, too." Grant worked for a small construction company. He came home tired and dusty, complaining about demanding clients and tight deadlines. Carmen had never questioned it. She had her own secrets to keep. "Grant seems like such a gentle guy," Karen continued. "You're lucky. Tom can be such a hothead." Gentle. Carmen almost laughed. Grant was careful, not gentle. He moved through the world like he was walking on thin ice, waiting for it to crack. She used to think he was protecting her feelings. Now she wondered what he was really protecting. Sunday morning, driving home through the pine forests, Grant's phone buzzed with text messages. He ignored them until they stopped for gas. "I need to make a quick call," he said, stepping away from the car. Carmen pretended to organize their camping gear in the back seat, but she watched Grant pace beside the gas pumps. His voice rose and fell, but she couldn't make out words. When he returned, his face was pale. "Work emergency?" Carmen asked. "Something like that." That night, Grant barely touched his dinner. He kept checking his phone, jumping at every sound from outside. Carmen had cooked his favorite meal, grilled chicken with rosemary potatoes, but he pushed the food around his plate like he was thinking about something else. "Grant." Carmen set down her fork. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." His voice came out too fast, too high. "Just tired from camping." Carmen studied his face. In her old life, she had been trained to read people, to spot lies before they fully formed. Grant's eyes darted to the left when he lied. His right hand touched his neck. Small tells, but clear ones. "Maybe you should take a vacation day tomorrow," she suggested. "Can't. Too much work." Another lie. Grant's hand went to his neck again. After dinner, Carmen loaded the dishwasher while Grant disappeared into his office. She could hear him moving around, opening and closing drawers. The phone rang again around 9 o'clock. "I'll get it," Grant called from his office. Carmen turned off the water and listened. Grant's voice was muffled through the closed door, but she caught fragments. "Told you I can't. Not that easy. Need more time." The conversation lasted 20 minutes. When Grant emerged, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm going to bed," he announced, not looking at her. Carmen watched him climb the stairs. His shoulders hunched forward like he was carrying invisible weight. She had married a man with secrets, but she had assumed they were small ones. Everyone had small secrets. She had been wrong about that before, that in bed that night. Grant lay on his side with his back to her. Carmen stared at the ceiling and thought about the woman she used to be. The woman who could slip through locked doors and eliminate targets without leaving traces. That woman would have demanded answers. That woman would have found the truth, whether Grant wanted to share it or not. But Carmen Hale was not that woman anymore. She was a wife who made dinner and went camping with friends and pretended not to notice when her husband lied to her face. The pretending was getting harder. The next evening, Carmen poured wine while Grant picked at his pot roast. He had barely spoken since coming home from work. His phone sat silent on the counter, but he kept glancing at it like he expected it to explode. "Long day?" Carmen asked. "You could say that." Grant's right hand touched his neck. Another lie. Carmen sipped her wine and watched her husband. 9 years of marriage had taught her to read his moods, but tonight felt different. Grant wasn't just distant or stressed. He was scared. The phone rang at 8:30. Grant shot up from his chair like he had been waiting for it. "I'll take this in the office," he said. "Grant, we're eating dinner." "It's important." He grabbed the phone and disappeared down the hall. Carmen heard his office door close with a soft click. She continued eating, but her mind was spinning. In her old life, curiosity had kept her alive. The ability to notice details, to ask questions, to dig until she found answers. That instinct had been dormant for 9 years, buried under the comfortable routine of civilian life. Tonight it stirred. Carmen finished her meal and started cleaning the kitchen. Grant's voice drifted from his office, too quiet to understand. She turned off the water and moved closer to the hallway. "Can't keep waiting." Grant's voice rose slightly. "I know what we agreed, but..." Carmen stepped into the hall. Grant's office door was closed, but she could hear him pacing inside. "She's not as tough as she thinks," Grant said, his voice clearer now. "Tomorrow, at the warehouse, make it look like an accident." The words hit Carmen like ice water in her veins. She stopped breathing. Her wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the hardwood floor. Grant's voice continued, oblivious to the broken glass in the hallway. "Yeah, I'm sure. She won't see it coming. She trusts me." Carmen's training kicked in without conscious thought. She moved away from the office door, stepping carefully around the wine and broken glass. Her mind processed the words with cold precision. She, not as tough as she thinks. At the warehouse, make it look like an accident. Grant was talking about her. Carmen knew which warehouse he meant. She had bought it 3 years ago under a false name, paying cash for a storage unit on the outskirts of town. It was her insurance policy. Reinforced locks, multiple exit routes, supplies hidden in false walls. A place to run if her old life ever caught up with her. Grant had never been there. Had never even asked about it. Carmen's hands shook as she knelt to pick up the larger pieces of glass. In the office, Grant's voice dropped to a whisper again. She caught fragments. "Make sure, no witnesses. Clean up after." The office door opened. Carmen was still kneeling by the broken glass, her mind racing. "Carmen." Grant appeared in the hallway, his face concerned. "What happened?" She looked up at her husband, the man she had shared a bed with for 9 years, the man she had cooked dinner for and gone camping with and loved as much as she was capable of loving anyone. "I dropped my glass," she said. Grant knelt beside her, helping gather the broken pieces. His hands were steady. His voice was gentle. "Careful," he said. "Don't cut yourself." Carmen stared at his face. The same face that had kissed her goodbye that morning. The same face that smiled at her across restaurant tables and laughed at her jokes and whispered that he loved her in the dark. "Who was on the phone?" she asked as Grant's eyes darted left. His hand touched his neck. "Work," he said. "Scheduling problems with the Henderson project." Carmen nodded and continued picking up glass. Her husband was going to kill her tomorrow. At the warehouse. He was going to make it look like an accident. "I'll get the vacuum," Grant said, standing up. "Thanks." Carmen watched him walk away. His shoulders no longer looked hunched with stress. They looked relaxed, relieved, like a man who had just solved a problem that had been weighing on him for a long time. "I end the kitchen." Carmen dumped the glass pieces into the trash. Her reflection stared back at her from the window over the sink. The same face she had been wearing for 9 years. The face of Carmen Hale, devoted wife and former Black Ops specialist who had buried her skills so deep she sometimes forgot they existed. Tomorrow, that face was supposed to die in an accident at a warehouse. Carmen smiled at her reflection. It was not a pleasant smile. Grant returned with the vacuum, humming under his breath. He cleaned up the wine and remaining glass with careful attention to detail. When he finished, he kissed Carmen on the cheek. "I'm going to watch some television," he said. "Join me?" "In a minute," Carmen replied. "I want to finish cleaning up." Grant settled into his recliner in the living room. Carmen could hear the television come on, the sound of a baseball game. She moved through the kitchen like she was tidying up, but her mind was working with the sharp focus she hadn't used in years. The warehouse. Tomorrow. Make it look like an accident. She thought about the storage unit she had set up as an escape route. Grant had never asked about it, never shown any interest in her private affairs. But somehow he knew about it. Someone had told him. Carmen dried her hands on a dish towel and joined Grant in the living room. He was watching baseball, his feet up on the ottoman. He looked peaceful, content. "Good game?" she asked, settling onto the couch. "Yankees are up by 3. Carmen nodded and pretended to watch. Her husband was going to murder her in less than 24 hours, and he was watching baseball like it was any other Tuesday night. She had underestimated him. For 9 years, she had seen Grant as weak, distant, damaged by whatever had happened in his childhood with his father Silas. She had protected him from her past, never telling him about the woman she used to be. She had been careful, gentle, normal. Grant had been playing a different game entirely. During a commercial break, he reached over and took her hand. "I love you," he said, squeezing her fingers. Carmen squeezed back. "I love you too." The lies came so easily. For both of them. Carmen lay in bed, listening to Grant snore. The digital clock on the nightstand read 2:17 a.m. She had been staring at the ceiling for 4 hours, her mind sharp and focused for the first time in years. Grant stirred beside her, rolling onto his back. In the darkness, he looked younger, innocent. Carmen studied his profile and tried to reconcile this sleeping man with the voice she had heard on the phone. Make it look like an accident. She slipped out of bed and padded barefoot to the kitchen. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of wind in the pine trees outside. Carmen made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, thinking that in her old life, she would have been planning Grant's death by now. Quick, clean, untraceable. But that woman was gone. Wasn't she? Carmen sipped her coffee and let her mind work. Grant wanted her dead. He had helped the phone conversation, made that clear. But why now? Why after 9 years of marriage? Money was the obvious answer. Carmen had savings from her old life, investments that Grant knew about and some that he didn't. She owned half the house, half their assets. If she died accidentally, Grant would inherit everything, but there had to be more. Grant wasn't the type to plan murder for money alone. He was weak, but he wasn't evil. Carmen finished her coffee and walked to the window. Outside, the street was empty except for a parked sedan she didn't recognize. Dark blue, possibly a rental. She memorized the license plate and moved away from the window. Someone was watching the house. Back in the bedroom, Grant was still sleeping. Carmen dressed quietly in dark clothing jeans, black sweater, running shoes. She grabbed her keys from the nightstand and slipped out the back door. The night air was cold and sharp. Carmen moved through the backyard like a shadow, staying low behind the fence line. Her old skills came back easily: how to move without sound, how to use darkness as cover, how to observe without being seen. The sedan was parked 3 houses down with a clear view of their front door. Carmen circled around the block and approached from behind. The car was empty but warm. Someone had been sitting in it recently. Carmen knelt beside the driver's door and examined the locks. Standard security, nothing special. She could have been inside in 30 seconds, but that would leave traces. Instead, she memorized everything she could see through the window's: rental paperwork on the passenger seat, fast food wrappers, a cell phone charger. Professional surveillance, but not high-end. Whoever Grant was working with had hired cheap help. Carmen made it back to the house without being seen. Grant was still asleep, snoring softly into his pillow. She undressed and slipped back into bed, her heart racing with something that might have been excitement. She had forgotten what it felt like to hunt. When the alarm went off at 6, Grant rolled over and kissed her forehead. "Morning, beautiful," he said. Carmen smiled and touched his cheek. "Morning." Grant showered and dressed for work with the same careful routine he followed every day. He kissed her goodbye at the front door, just like always. "Have a good day," he said. "You too." Carmen watched him drive away. Then she went to work. Her first call was to a phone number she hadn't dialed in 9 years. It rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. "Price Auto Repair." "Noah, it's Carmen." The silence stretched for 10 seconds. "Carmen." Noah's voice was flat. "It's been a while. I need a favor." "I don't do favors anymore. I got a kid now. A business. I'm clean." Carmen sat down at the kitchen table. Noah Price had been her spotter in Afghanistan back when she was someone else. He was 5 years older than her, built like a linebacker with steady hands and a calm voice that had talked her through more than one impossible shot. "This isn't work," Carmen said. "It's personal. Everything was personal with you." "Noah, listen to me. Someone is trying to kill me." Another silence. "Your husband." Noah asked. Carmen closed her eyes. Noah had always been too smart for his own good. "How did you know?" "Lucky guess. What do you need?" Carmen told him everything: the phone call, the warehouse, the surveillance car. Noah listened without interrupting. "You sure about this?" he asked when she finished. "I'm sure." "Okay, what's the plan?" Carmen had forgotten how good it felt to work with someone who understood. "I need backup, and I need Riley. Riley's in Phoenix now. Private security for some tech company. She's not going to want to get involved. Call her." "Carmen!" "Call her Noah. Tell her it's me." Noah sighed. "Give me an hour." Carmen's second call was to a number she had memorized but never used. It rang twice. "Flagstaff Storage Solutions," a bored voice answered. "I need to access Unit 47B today," Carmen said. "What's your access code?" Carmen recited a string of numbers she hadn't spoken in 3 years. "Okay, Mrs. Patterson. Unit 47B is available 24/7 with your key card access." Mrs. Patterson was the name on the fake ID Carmen had used to rent the storage unit, one of several identities she maintained as insurance policies. Carmen hung up and made a third call. This one was answered on the first ring. "Riley Vega." "It's Carmen." "Well, hell." Riley's voice carried a hint of her old Texas accent. "Noah said you might call. I need help." "So I heard." Your husband wants to kill you at some warehouse. Riley had always been direct. As a sniper, she had learned to cut through complicated situations and find the simple truth at the center. Can you get to Flagstaff by tonight? Carmen asked. Maybe. Depends on what you're planning. I'm not planning to die. Riley laughed. Fair enough. Text me the address. Carmen hung up and looked around her kitchen. This morning, she had been Carmen Hale, housewife. Now she was someone else. Someone from before. The transition felt natural, like putting on clothes that fit perfectly after wearing the wrong size for years. Grant called at lunchtime. Hey, babe, he said, his voice bright and false. How's your day? Fine, Carmen replied. Quiet. Listen, I might be late tonight. This Henderson project is turning into a nightmare. Carmen smiled at her reflection in the kitchen window. No problem. I'll keep dinner warm. You're the best. Love you. Love you too. Carmen spent the afternoon preparing. She drove to 3 different locations around town, a sporting goods store, a hardware store, a pharmacy. She bought supplies with cash, spreading the purchases across multiple locations to avoid drawing attention. T4 o'clock. She drove to the storage facility. Unit 47B was in the back corner of the complex, surrounded by empty units. Carmen used her keycard to access the gate and drove to the rear of the property. The storage unit looked ordinary from the outside, a standard 10 by 12 space with a roll-up door. But Carmen had reinforced it from the inside. Steel plates behind the walls, multiple locks, hidden compartments containing supplies she had hoped never to need again. She opened the unit and stepped inside. Everything was exactly as she had left it 3 years ago. Weapons, ammunition, cash, fake identification documents, medical supplies. The tools of her old trade, carefully preserved and waiting. Carmen selected what she needed and loaded it into her car. As she was closing the unit, her phone buzzed with a text from Noah. In town. Riley's driving up from Phoenix. Where do you want to meet? Carmen typed back an address, a diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where strangers could sit in a corner booth and not attract attention. She arrived first and claimed a table in the back. Noah walked in 10 minutes later, looking exactly like she remembered, broad shoulders, graying beard, cautious eyes that swept the room before settling on her face. You look good, he said, sliding into the booth across from her. You look tired. Noah shrugged. Single father. Goes with the territory. They ordered coffee and waited. Riley arrived just as the sun was setting, her red hair tied back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a leather jacket. She moved like a dancer, all controlled grace and coiled energy. This is a terrible idea, she said, sitting down next to Noah. Probably, Carmen agreed. Your husband really trying to kill you. Tonight, at the warehouse. Riley studied Carmen's face. You sure you want to do this? We could call the cops, let them handle it. Carmen shook her head. Grant's not working alone, and I don't know how deep this goes. So what's the plan? Noah asked. Carmen leaned forward and told them. Carmen returned home at sunset to find Grant's car in the driveway. He was early, which meant he was either nervous or eager to get his plan moving. She parked beside him and took a deep breath before walking to the front door. Grant was in the kitchen, opening a bottle of beer. He looked up when she entered, his face carefully neutral. Hey, he said. How was your day? Good. Ran some errands. Carmen set her purse on the counter and watched Grant's eyes. They didn't quite meet hers. You're home early. Finished up faster than expected. Grant took a long drink from his beer. Thought we could have dinner together, like a real married couple. The irony in his voice was new. Carmen had never heard Grant speak with that edge before. That would be nice, she said. What do you want to eat? Whatever you feel like making. Carmen moved to the refrigerator, using the motion to study Grant's reflection in the chrome surface. He was watching her, but not the way a husband watches his wife. More like a scientist observing a lab rat. "Pasta," she suggested. "Sure." Carmen started cooking, aware of Grant's eyes on her back. He sat at the kitchen table, drinking his beer and making small talk about his day. But underneath the ordinary conversation, she could feel his tension. Tonight was the night. He was counting down the hours until she would be dead. "Remember when we first moved here?" Grant said suddenly. Carmen looked over her shoulder. "What made you think of that?" "I don't know. Just remembering." Grant's voice carried a strange nostalgia. "You were so different then. Quiet. Almost shy. I was adjusting to a new place." "Yeah, but it was more than that. You seemed careful, like you were afraid of something." Carmen turned back to the stove. Grant was fishing, trying to understand the woman he planned to murder. After 9 years, he had finally started asking questions. "I wasn't afraid," she said. "Just private." "You never talk about your life before Flagstaff. Your family, your job, anything." Carmen stirred the pasta sauce and chose her words carefully. "There's not much to talk about. I worked for the government. Boring office job. My parents are dead. No siblings. Not much of a story. Government work." Grant's voice sharpened with interest. "What kind of government work?" Carmen had told him she worked for the Department of Agriculture, analyzing crop reports. It was a cover story she had used before, boring enough that most people lost interest quickly. "Analysis work," she said. "Statistics and reports." "For 9 years." Carmen turned to face him. Grant was leaning forward, his beer forgotten on the table. This was the most interest he had ever shown in her past. "Why the sudden curiosity?" she asked as Grant's eyes darted left. His hand touched his neck. "Just thinking about how little we really know each other," he said. Another lie, but this one felt different. More dangerous. Carmen served dinner and sat across from her husband. They ate in silence for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. "Carmen," Grant said finally, "do you ever think about what would happen if one of us died?" The question hung in the air between them. Carmen set down her fork and looked at Grant's face. He was trying to appear casual, but sweat beaded his forehead despite the cool evening air. "That's a morbid topic for dinner conversation," she said. "I'm serious. We never talk about practical things. Insurance, wills, what the surviving spouse would do." Carmen smiled. "Are you planning to die on me?" Grant forced a laugh. "No, but accidents happen. I work construction. You drive that old car. We should be prepared." "You're right." Carmen took a bite of pasta. "We should update our wills. Make sure everything is in order." Grant nodded eagerly. "Exactly. I was thinking we could meet with a lawyer next week." Carmen almost laughed. Grant wanted her dead tonight, but he was still worried about the legal details. Some habits died hard. "That's a good idea," she said. "I'll call someone tomorrow." Grant's face fell slightly. He had been hoping she would die before tomorrow, before she could complicate his inheritance with legal questions. After dinner, Grant disappeared into his office again. Carmen cleaned the kitchen and waited. At 9 o'clock, the phone rang. Grant answered on the second ring. Carmen moved to the hallway and listened. This time, Grant's voice was clearer. He was excited, confident. "Everything's set," he said. "She doesn't suspect anything." "Yeah, I'm sure. She trusts me completely." A pause while the other person spoke. "No, she never talks about her past. Doesn't have any family. No one will ask too many questions." Another pause. "The storage unit is perfect. Isolated area, no witnesses. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong." Carmen pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding. Grant had more details about her private storage unit than she had expected. Someone had been watching her for a long time. "What about the fire?" Grant asked. Right, accelerant makes it look accidental. And you're sure there won't be enough left to identify. Fire. They were planning to burn her body. Okay, Grant continued. I'll bring her there around 11. You guys be ready. The conversation ended. Carmen heard Grant's chair creak as he leaned back. He was probably smiling. She returned to the living room and pretended to read a magazine. When Grant emerged from his office 20 minutes later, his face was calm and pleasant. Want to watch a movie? He asked. Sure. They settled on the couch together. Grant put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. His body felt warm and solid against hers. Familiar. Safe that in 2 hours he would try to kill her. Carmen, Grant said during a commercial break. I want you to know that I love you. Whatever happens, remember that. Carmen looked up at his face. He was staring at the television, but his jaw was tight with emotion. Real emotion, not the fake concern he had been showing all evening. I love you too, she said. It wasn't entirely a lie. She had loved him once, before she knew what he really was. Part of her still loved the man she had thought he was. Grant squeezed her shoulders. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Carmen closed her eyes and let herself feel the weight of his arm around her. In another life, they might have been happy together. Two broken people finding comfort in each other's damage. But Grant had chosen a different ending to their story. 10:30. Grant stretched and stood up from the couch. I'm getting restless, he said. Want to go for a drive? Maybe get some ice cream. Carmen pretended to consider it. It's kind of late. Come on. When's the last time we did something spontaneous? Carmen smiled and stood up. Okay, let me get my jacket. She went upstairs to their bedroom and grabbed a light jacket from the closet. In the pocket, she slipped a small knife she had taken from her storage unit. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. Grant was waiting by the front door, keys in hand. He looked nervous now, the reality of what he was planning finally hitting him. Ready? He asked. Ready. They drove through Flagstaff in comfortable silence. Grant took the main roads at first, heading toward downtown. But after 10 minutes, he turned onto a side street that led toward the industrial area on the outskirts of town. Where are we going? Carmen asked. There's a new place I heard about, Grant said. 24-hour ice cream shop. Another lie. Grant's hand touched his neck. Carmen watched the buildings thin out as they drove toward the edge of town. Warehouses and storage facilities lined the dark streets. Her storage unit was 3 miles ahead. You know, Carmen said conversationally, I've been thinking about what you said at dinner, about not knowing much about each other. Grant glanced at her. Yeah. You never talk about your father. Grant's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Nothing to talk about. You said he was hard on you when you were a kid. He was. Grant's voice turned cold. Silas always thought I was weak. Too soft. He said I'd never amount to anything unless I learned to be tougher. Carmen filed the information away. Silas. Grant's father had a name, and apparently an opinion about Grant's marriage. Is that why you moved to Flagstaff? To get away from him? Partly. Grant turned onto Industrial Road. He didn't approve of you. He never met me. Didn't matter. He said you made me look weak. Said a real man wouldn't let his wife be stronger than him. Carmen felt the pieces clicking into place. Grant's father had pushed him into this. Not just for money, but for pride. To prove that Grant wasn't the weak man Silas thought he was. Do you think I make you look weak? Carmen asked. Grant was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sometimes, he said, you're so sure of yourself, so confident. I always felt like I was disappointing you just by being me. Carmen stared at her husband's profile. Grant, I never. It doesn't matter now, Grant interrupted. We're here. Carmen looked ahead and saw the entrance to the storage facility. Her heart began to race, but not with fear. With anticipation, Grant pulled into the parking lot and drove toward the back section where Unit 47B was located. The lot was empty except for 2 other cars, a white pickup truck and a black sedan. "This doesn't look like an ice cream shop," Carmen said mildly. Grant parked next to the pickup truck and turned off the engine. In the sudden silence, Carmen could hear his breathing, fast and shallow. "No," he said. "It's not." 3 men emerged from the vehicles. Carmen recognized one of them as the driver of the surveillance car that had been watching their house. The other 2 were strangers, rough-looking men in work clothes and baseball caps. Grant opened his door and stepped out. Carmen did the same, moving slowly and keeping her hands visible. "Evening, folks," the man from the surveillance car said. He was tall and thin, with a scraggly beard and nervous eyes. "Beautiful night for a drive." Grant nodded, but didn't speak. His face was pale in the parking lot lights. "You must be Carmen," the man continued, turning his attention to her. "I'm Bobby. These are my associates, Frank and Luis." Carmen smiled politely. "Nice to meet you." Bobby seemed surprised by her calm response. He had probably expected tears, begging, or attempts to run. "Your husband tells us you have a storage unit here," Bobby said. "Unit 47B. We'd like to take a look inside." "Of course," Carmen said. "I'd be happy to show you." She reached into her jacket pocket for the keycard, but her fingers closed around the handle of the knife instead. Not yet. She needed to get closer to the unit, closer to her real weapons. "This way," she said, leading the group across the parking lot. Unit 47B was in the back corner of the facility, surrounded by shadows and empty spaces. Perfect for what Grant had planned. Also perfect for what Carmen had planned. "Here we are," Carmen said, stopping in front of the unit. "Open it up," Bobby said. Carmen swiped her keycard and grabbed the handle of the roll-up door. The metal creaked as she lifted it, revealing the dark interior of the storage unit. "Doesn't look like much," Frank said, peering inside. Carmen stepped into the unit and reached for the light switch. In the split second of darkness before the fluorescent bulbs flickered on, she moved. The knife appeared in her hand like magic. She spun and drove the blade into Bobby's throat before he could react. His eyes went wide with shock, but no sound came out. Blood poured down his shirt as he collapsed. Frank and Luis scrambled for their weapons, but Carmen was already moving. She grabbed a crowbar from the wall of the storage unit and swung it in a vicious arc. The metal bar caught Frank across the side of his head with a wet crack. He dropped like a stone. Luis managed to draw his gun, but Carmen was on him before he could aim. She trapped his gun hand against his body and drove her knee into his solar plexus. He doubled over, gasping for air. Carmen took the gun and stepped back. "Don't move," she said. Luis looked up at her with fear and confusion. "What the hell?" "Shut up," Carmen said. She looked around the storage unit. 2 men dead or unconscious, one alive and terrified. Where was Grant? She found him cowering behind the pickup truck, his face white with shock. "Carmen," he gasped when he saw her. "What? How did you? Get over here," Carmen ordered. Grant stumbled forward on unsteady legs. When he saw Bobby's body, he turned and vomited in the parking lot. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "You killed him." "He was going to kill me," Carmen replied. "Thanks to you." Grant wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "I didn't know they were going to. I thought they would just, what? Make it painless." Carmen laughed. "You hired men to murder your wife, Grant. What did you think was going to happen?" Grant looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Who are you?" Carmen considered the question. "I'm the woman you've been married to for 9 years. I'm also the woman you tried to have killed tonight. Which version would you like to talk to?" "I don't understand." Carmen gestured to Luis, who was still on his knees, trying to catch his breath. Explain it to him. Luis looked between Carmen and Grant with growing panic. Lady, I don't know what's happening here, but we can work this out. No, Carmen said. We can't. She raised the gun and shot Luis in the head. The sound echoed through the storage facility like thunder. Grant screamed and fell to his knees. Carmen, please. I'm sorry. I never wanted. Yes, you did. Carmen's voice was calm and cold. You wanted me dead. You planned this for weeks, maybe months. You brought me here to die. It was my father, Grant sobbed. Silas made me do it. He said I was weak, that I'd never be a man as long as you were around. He said killing you was the only way to prove myself. Carmen nodded. Where is Silas now? At the cabin, outside town. Carmen knew the place. Grant had mentioned it before, a hunting cabin that belonged to his father, up in the mountains. She had never been there. Is he expecting you to call when this is finished? Carmen asked. Grant nodded, miserably. Carmen looked around the storage unit. 3 bodies, blood on the concrete floor, her husband kneeling in his own vomit. Not the evening she had planned, but not unexpected either. Get up, she told Grant. What are you going to do? Clean up your mess. Carmen spent the next hour transforming the storage unit into something from her old life. She worked methodically, using supplies she had hoped never to touch again. Grant sat in the corner, watching her with horror and fascination. Help me move these bodies, Carmen said. Grant shook his head. I can't. You can and you will, unless you want to join them. Grant's face went even paler, but he struggled to his feet. Together, they dragged the 3 bodies deeper into the storage unit. Carmen arranged them against the back wall, out of sight from anyone passing by. Get their wallets, Carmen instructed. Why? Because I said so. Grant fumbled through the dead men's pockets with shaking hands. He found 3 wallets, 2 cell phones, and a set of car keys. Carmen examined the wallets. Bobby Henshaw, Frank Morrison, Luis Gutierrez. Local men, probably hired muscle from one of the rougher bars in town. Not professionals, just desperate men willing to kill for money. How much did you pay them? Carmen asked. $5,000 each, Grant whispered. Cheap, Carmen observed. Your life is only worth $15,000. Grant flinched at her tone. Carmen checked the cell phones. Bobby had received several text messages from an unknown number, all discussing the timing of tonight's operation. The last message was from an hour ago. Package delivered. Call when finished. That's Silas, Grant said when Carmen showed him the message. I figured. Carmen pocketed Bobby's phone and smashed the other 2 against the concrete wall. She used bleach from her supplies to clean the blood from the floor, working with the efficiency of someone who had done this before. You're good at this, Grant said quietly. Carmen looked up from her scrubbing. What? Cleaning up bodies. You've done it before. Carmen didn't answer. She finished cleaning the floor and moved to the back of the storage unit. Behind a false wall, she retrieved several items she had hoped never to use again. Plastic explosives, timer devices, accelerant. Carmen, Grant said, his voice rising with panic. What are you doing? Making it look like an accident, Carmen replied. Isn't that what you wanted? She worked quickly, setting charges throughout the storage unit. The explosion would destroy the bodies and any evidence of what had happened here. To investigators, it would look like a storage facility accident, maybe a gas leak, maybe faulty electrical wiring. This is crazy, Grant said. You can't just blow up a building. Watch me. Carmen finished setting the charges and gathered her remaining supplies. She had 15 minutes before the timer activated. We need to leave, she said. They walked to Grant's car, leaving the 3 other vehicles behind. Carmen drove, with Grant slumped in the passenger seat like a broken doll. "Where are we going?" Grant asked. "Home." "What about Silas?" "What about him?" Grant looked at her with desperate hope. "Maybe we could just leave. Disappear. Start over somewhere else." Carmen almost laughed. "You think I'm going to run away with the man who tried to have me murdered?" "I was wrong," Grant said quickly. "I know that now. I was scared and stupid, and I let my father manipulate me. But we could fix this. We could—" Carmen stopped the car at a red light and turned to look at her husband. "Grant, do you know what I used to do for the government?" Grant shook his head. "I killed people. Bad people, usually, but people nonetheless. I was very good at it. I retired 9 years ago because I thought I wanted a normal life. A husband, a home, maybe children someday." The light turned green. Carmen drove through the intersection. "I gave up everything for you," she continued. "My career, my skills, my identity. I became Carmen Hale, housewife. I cooked your dinner and did your laundry and pretended to be satisfied with your careful, distant love." Grant was crying now, tears streaming down his face. "And tonight," Carmen said, "I found out it was all a lie. You never loved me. You were just waiting for the right moment to get rid of me." "That's not true," Grant sobbed. "I did love you. I do love you." Carmen pulled into their driveway and turned off the engine. "No, you don't. And I don't love you either. Not anymore." Behind them, the night sky lit up with orange flame as the storage facility exploded. The sound reached them a few seconds later, a deep rumble that shook the windows of their house. Grant turned to look at the distant fire. "Oh my God." "3 men just died because of your cowardice," Carmen said. "4 if you count yourself." "What do you mean?" Carmen got out of the car and walked to the front door. Grant followed her, stumbling like a drunk man. Inside the house, Carmen poured herself a glass of wine. Grant sat at the kitchen table and stared at his hands. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you call your father." Grant looked up with confusion. "What?" "Call Silas. Tell him everything went according to plan. Tell him I'm dead." "I can't. You can and you will." Carmen's voice carried the authority she had once used to command soldiers. "Because if you don't, I'll kill you right now." Grant believed her. He picked up the phone with trembling hands and dialed a number. "Dad," he said when someone answered. "It's done." Carmen could hear Silas's voice on the other end, gruff and pleased. "Good boy," Silas said. "How do you feel?" Grant looked at Carmen. Her face was expressionless, offering no guidance. "Different," Grant said finally. "That's what killing does to a man," Silas replied. "Makes you stronger. We'll celebrate tomorrow. Come up to the cabin and tell me all about it." "Okay," Grant said. "And Grant, I'm proud of you. For the first time in your life, you acted like a man." The line went dead. Grant set the phone down and looked at Carmen. "He's proud of me," Grant said, his voice hollow. "He won't be tomorrow." Carmen woke up alone in bed the next morning. Grant's side was cold, which meant he had been up for a while. She found him in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, staring out the window at the mountains. "Sleep well?" she asked. Grant jumped at the sound of her voice. "I didn't sleep." Carmen poured herself coffee and sat across from him. Her husband looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale and drawn. "Having second thoughts?" she asked. "About what?" "About last night. About me. About what you've learned." Grant was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at her with something that might have been fear or might have been awe. "You're not who I thought you were," he said. "No," Carmen agreed. "I'm not. All these years I thought you were ordinary, safe." Carmen sipped her coffee. "I let you think that." "Why?" Carmen considered the question. "Because I wanted to be ordinary. I was tired of being dangerous. Grant nodded slowly. And now I remember why I was good at what I did. They sat in silence, two strangers who had shared a bed for 9 years. Carmen studied her husband's face and tried to feel something for him: anger, disappointment, even pity. But there was nothing. The man she had loved was gone, replaced by this hollow shell who had betrayed her for his father's approval. "Carmen," Grant said finally, "what you did last night, killing those men, it doesn't bother you at all. Should it? They're dead. Because of me? Yes, but you pulled the trigger." Carmen set down her coffee cup. "Grant, those men came to murder me. They brought accelerant to burn my body. They were going to make it look like an accident, so you could inherit my money. Why should I feel bad about defending myself?" Grant flinched at her matter-of-fact tone. "But the way you did it, so calm, so efficient, like you'd done it 100 times before." "I have." The simple statement hung in the air between them. Grant stared at her with growing horror. "How many people have you killed?" he asked. Carmen considered lying, but what was the point? "I stopped counting after 20. Grant pushed back from the table so hard his chair fell over. "Jesus Christ." Most of them were enemy combatants. Terrorists, war criminals, people who posed threats to national security. Carmen's voice remained calm. A few were closer to home. Traitors, double agents, people who betrayed their country for money. Grant backed toward the kitchen door. "You're a killer." "Yes." "A government assassin." "I prefer the term specialist, but yes." Grant's face went white. "And I tried to have you murdered." Carmen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Yes, you did." Grant turned and ran. Carmen heard him stumble up the stairs, heard their bedroom door slam. She finished her coffee and went to find him. Grant was sitting on their bed, his head in his hands. When Carmen entered the room, he looked up at her with tear-filled eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "God, Carmen, I'm so sorry." Carmen sat on the edge of the bed, just out of his reach. "Are you sorry you tried to kill me, or sorry you failed?" "Both." "Neither." "I don't know." Grant wiped his eyes. "I was so scared of you. Not consciously. But there was always something about you that made me feel small, weak, like you were playing a part, pretending to be someone you weren't." "I was." "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" Carmen looked around their bedroom, the wedding photos on the dresser, the matching nightstands, the carefully coordinated bedding, all the props of a normal marriage. "Because I wanted the lie to be true," she said. "I wanted to be the woman in those pictures, happy, ordinary, in love with her ordinary husband. But you weren't." "No." Grant was quiet for a moment. "What happens to us now?" Carmen stood up from the bed. "There is no us, Grant. You killed us last night when you decided I should die. But I didn't go through with it, only because I stopped you." Carmen walked to their shared closet and pulled out a suitcase. "You're going to pack your things and leave." Grant watched her throw clothes into the suitcase. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care. Stay with friends, get a hotel, sleep in your car. Just get out of my house." "Our house." Carmen stopped packing and turned to look at him. "Grant, I killed 3 men last night. I destroyed evidence and covered up a crime. Do you really want to argue with me about property rights?" Grant shrank back against the headboard. "No." "Good." Carmen continued packing his clothes with efficient, brutal movements. "When you leave, you're going to drive to your father's cabin. You're going to tell him everything went according to plan. You're going to celebrate with him." "Why?" Carmen didn't answer. She finished packing Grant's clothes and zipped the suitcase shut. "Carmen, please," Grant said. "We can work this out. We can go to counseling or—" Carmen turned to face him, and something in her expression made Grant stop talking. "Grant," she said quietly, "I heard every word. You're not forgiven. You never will be. For the first time since she had known him, Grant really looked at his wife, not at the careful mask she had worn for 9 years, but at the woman underneath. The woman who had killed 3 men without hesitation. The woman who was looking at him now like he was already dead. Grant grabbed his suitcase and fled. Grant sat in his car outside their house for 20 minutes after Carmen dismissed him, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. Through the kitchen window, he could see her moving around, cleaning up their breakfast dishes like it was any other morning. Like she hadn't killed 3 men 12 hours ago. Finally, he started the engine and drove to a motel on the edge of town. The desk clerk barely looked at him as he paid cash for a room. Grant locked himself inside and sat on the bed, staring at the water-stained walls. His phone rang. Silas. Where are you, boy? I expected you at the cabin an hour ago. Grant cleared his throat. I'm coming, Dad. Just needed to tie up some loose ends. What kind of loose ends? Grant closed his eyes. Carmen had told him to act like everything went according to plan, but lying to his father had never been easy. Bank stuff, he said finally. Insurance claims. Making sure everything looks right. Silas grunted approval. Smart thinking. Can't be too careful with these things. But don't take too long. We have celebrating to do. I know. Grant. Silas's voice softened slightly. You did good, son. Real good. Your mother would be proud. Grant's chest tightened. His mother had been dead for 15 years, killed in a car accident that everyone except Grant believed was an accident. He had never been sure about his father's involvement, but he had never asked questions either. Thanks, Dad. See you soon. Grant hung up and stared at his reflection in the motel room mirror. 41 years old, and he was still seeking his father's approval, still trying to prove he wasn't the weak, disappointing son Silas had always claimed he was. Last night was supposed to change that. Killing Carmen was supposed to make him strong, independent, worthy of his father's respect. Instead, it had revealed just how weak he really was. Grant thought about Carmen's face when she told him he was not forgiven. Not anger or hurt or betrayal. Just cold, clinical assessment. Like she was deciding whether he was worth the effort to kill. Maybe he should run. Take what money he had and disappear before Carmen decided to finish what he had started. But where could he go that she wouldn't find him? She had resources, skills, connections from her old life. If she wanted him dead, he would be dead. Grant's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Bobby missed check-in. Status report required. Grant stared at the message. Bobby was dead, burned to ash in the storage facility explosion. But whoever sent this text didn't know that yet. Grant typed back. Bobby injured. Mission compromised. Need extraction. The response came immediately. Location? Grant hesitated, then gave the address of a truck stop 10 miles outside town. He needed time to think, to figure out what Carmen was planning. If there were more people involved in the conspiracy against her, she would want to know about them. Grant drove to the truck stop and waited in his car. 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. 2 men got out, both wearing suits, both carrying themselves like military or law enforcement. Grant rolled down his window as they approached. You Grant Hale? The older man asked. Yeah. I'm Davidson. This is Torres. We work for your father. Grant felt a chill. My father. Silas has been planning this for months, Davidson explained. Your wife is not who you think she is. She's dangerous, a trained killer. I know. Davidson raised an eyebrow. You know. Grant nodded miserably. She killed Bobby and the others. Last night at the storage unit. She's not normal. Torres stepped forward. Where is she now? At home, I think. She kicked me out. Davidson and Torres exchanged glances. Mr. Hale, Davidson said carefully, your father hired us to eliminate a threat. Your wife is that threat. If she's killed our associates and blown her cover, she's going to run. We need to stop her before she disappears. Grant thought about Carmen making breakfast, cleaning dishes, acting like nothing had changed. She's not running. How do you know? Because she told me to come to the cabin and celebrate with my father. Davidson frowned. Why would she do that? Grant finally understood. Because she's coming for him. The three men stood in the truck stop parking lot as the implication sank in. Carmen wasn't running or hiding. She was hunting. We need to warn Silas, Torres said. Davidson shook his head. We need to stop her first. Grant looked between the two men. Professional killers, just like Carmen. But they didn't know what she was capable of. You don't understand, Grant said. She's not like Bobby and those guys. She's military. Special operations. She's done this before. So have we, Davidson replied coldly. Grant almost laughed. These men thought they were dealing with an ordinary housewife who got lucky in a fight. They had no idea what was coming for them. Call my father, Grant said. Tell him to leave the cabin. Go somewhere safe. Davidson pulled out his phone and dialed. It went straight to voicemail. He's not answering, Davidson said. Then we go to the cabin, Torres said. Grant climbed into the back seat of the SUV. As they drove toward the mountains, he tried calling his father again. Still no answer. Carmen had a 4-hour head start. Noah Price was replacing brake pads on a Ford pickup when his phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and felt his stomach drop. Carmen, I need another favor. Noah wiped his hands on a shop rag and walked outside, away from his employees. What kind of favor? The kind that involves a teenage girl. Noah's blood went cold. My daughter. Grant's desperate. He's going to try something stupid. Carmen, if you've put my kid in danger, I haven't. But Grant might. Where is she right now? Noah looked at his watch. 2:30 in the afternoon. School. Gets out at 3:15. Pick her up early. Take her somewhere safe. What aren't you telling me? Carmen's voice was calm, professional. Grant's father hired people to kill me. Professional people. When they figure out Grant failed, they're going to look for leverage. Noah was already walking toward his truck. How many people? At least 2, maybe more. They're probably watching your shop right now. Noah scanned the street outside his garage. A dark sedan was parked across from the elementary school 2 blocks away. It hadn't been there this morning. I see them, he said. Get your daughter and disappear for 24 hours. After that, it'll be over. Carmen! 24 hours, Noah. That's all I need. The line went dead. Noah grabbed his keys and drove toward the school, his mind racing. Carmen had saved his life in Afghanistan. He owed her. But his daughter was the most important thing in his world. The school. Noah badged his way into the office and explained there was a family emergency. The secretary knew him. He had been volunteering at school events since his daughter started kindergarten. She didn't ask questions. Daddy. 16-year-old Emma Price looked up from her locker, confused. What's wrong? We need to go on a little trip, Noah said, keeping his voice calm. Right now. Right now. Emma was smart enough not to argue. She grabbed her backpack and followed her father to the truck. As they drove past the dark sedan, Noah memorized the license plate. Dad, you're scaring me, Emma said. I know, sweetheart, but we're going to be okay. Noah drove to a sporting goods store and bought camping gear with cash. Then he drove deep into the national forest, to a campsite he had used for hunting trips. Remote, defensible off any grid. Are we in danger? Emma asked as they set up their tent. Noah looked at his daughter, tall for her age, with her mother's dark eyes and stubborn chin. She deserved honesty. Maybe, he said. An old friend of mine is in trouble. Some bad people might try to use us to hurt her. The friend who saved your life in the war. Noah had told Emma that story when she was younger, leaving out the violent details. A fellow soldier who had risked everything to pull him out of an ambush. Yeah. Emma nodded thoughtfully. Then we help her. Noah smiled despite his fear. We help her by staying hidden until it's over. How long will that be? Noah thought about Carmen's voice on the phone. Cold, focused, deadly. Not long. Meanwhile, Grant sat in the passenger seat of the SUV as Davidson and Torres debated tactics. They had been driving in circles around Flagstaff for 2 hours, trying to locate Carmen. She's not at the house, Torres reported after calling in the surveillance team. Neighbors saw her leave around noon. Where would she go? Davidson asked Grant. Grant had no idea. After 9 years of marriage, he realized he knew almost nothing about his wife's habits or preferences. She had been a careful stranger, hiding in plain sight. Maybe she went to the cabin, Grant suggested. Davidson shook his head. We have people watching the access roads. She hasn't come up the mountain. Grant's phone rang. Carmen. Davidson grabbed the phone before Grant could answer. He held it where all 3 men could hear. Grant. Carmen's voice sounded worried, concerned. Where are you? I came home and you weren't here. Grant looked at Davidson, who nodded for him to answer. I'm driving around, Grant said, trying to think. About what? About us. About what happens now. Carmen was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was gentle. Grant, I know you're scared. What happened last night was intense, but we can work through this. Davidson raised an eyebrow. This didn't sound like a trained killer planning revenge. Can we? Grant asked. Of course. You made a mistake, but people make mistakes. Maybe we could go to counseling. Start over. Grant felt a flicker of hope despite everything. Maybe Carmen was willing to forgive him after all. I'd like that, he said. Good. Where are you now? Grant looked at Davidson, who was frantically shaking his head. I'm not sure, Grant said. Well, when you figure it out, come home. We have a lot to talk about. Okay. Grant, I love you. The line went dead. Davidson stared at the phone with confusion. That didn't sound like a killer, Torres said. Grant felt conflicted. Maybe Carmen really was willing to forgive him. Maybe they could fix their marriage after all. Davidson's phone rang. He answered on speaker. Boss, we have a problem, the voice on the other end reported. The target acquired Noah Price's daughter from school. She's using the girl as insurance. Grant's hope evaporated. Carmen hadn't forgiven him. She was using his conversation to track down anyone who might help him. Where are they now? Davidson asked. Unknown. Price's shop is closed. House is empty. They disappeared. Davidson looked at Grant with cold eyes. Your wife just kidnapped a child. Grant felt sick. He had thought Carmen was dangerous before, but taking an innocent girl crossed a line he hadn't imagined she would cross. We have to stop her, Grant said. Now, you're thinking straight, Davidson replied. Torres was studying a map on his phone. If she has the girl, she'll want somewhere isolated for the exchange. Somewhere she can control the environment. The cabin, Grant said with sudden certainty. She's going to the cabin. Davidson started the engine. Then that's where we're going. As they drove toward the mountains, Grant tried to process what was happening. 24 hours ago, he had been planning to murder his wife. Now he was racing to save her kidnapping victim and protect his father from a woman he no longer recognized. The irony was not lost on him. The cabin sat in a clearing 20 miles up a winding mountain road, surrounded by pine trees and silence. Silas Hale had built it 30 years ago as a hunting lodge, but it had become his refuge from the world. No neighbors, no phone service, no witnesses to anything that happened there. Carmen parked her car in the trees a quarter mile from the cabin and approached on foot. She moved through the forest like a ghost, using skills she had learned in places where noise meant death. The cabin was exactly as Grant had described it, a simple A-frame structure with a stone chimney and a wraparound porch. Smoke rose from the chimney, and she could see lights in the windows. Someone was home. Carmen circled the building, noting the exits and windows, the cleared firing lanes, the defensible positions. Whoever built this place had thought about security. She found Silas on the back porch, cleaning a hunting rifle. He was a big man in his 70s, with white hair and calloused hands. He looked like the kind of man who had been breaking things his whole life. "Silas Hale." Carmen stepped out of the tree line. Silas looked up from his rifle, unsurprised to see a stranger in his remote clearing. "That's me," he said. "You lost, lady?" "Not exactly." Carmen walked closer, her hands visible and empty. "I'm Carmen, Grant's wife." Silas went very still. His eyes flicked to the rifle in his hands, then back to Carmen's face. "You're supposed to be dead," he said. "I know." Carmen stopped 10 feet from the porch, close enough to talk, far enough away that Silas couldn't reach her quickly. "Your son tried to have me killed last night," Carmen said. 3 men with guns and gasoline, planning to make it look like an accident. Silas set down his rifle and stood up slowly. "Where's Grant?" "Safe. For now. What do you want?" Carmen studied the old man's face. She could see where Grant got his weak chin, his nervous eyes. But Silas had something Grant lacked, a core of meanness that had probably served him well over the years. "I want to know why," Carmen said. "Why what?" "Why you convinced your son to kill me." Silas laughed, a harsh sound in the mountain air. "Lady, I didn't convince him of anything. That boy's been looking for an excuse to get rid of you since the day he married you." Carmen felt a flicker of something that might have been hurt. "Is that right?" "Damn right. You made him feel small, worthless. Every day he came home to you was another day he felt like less of a man. And you encouraged that feeling." Silas shrugged. "I told him the truth, that he'd never be worth a damn as long as he was married to a woman stronger than him." Carmen nodded thoughtfully. "So you helped him hire killers?" "I helped him find his backbone," Silas corrected. "Killing you was his idea. But you provided the resources, the contacts." Silas's eyes narrowed. "You recording this conversation?" "No." "Good. Because if I thought you were trying to build a case against me—" "I'm not building a case," Carmen said. "I'm ending one." Carmen pulled a pistol from behind her back and shot Silas twice in the chest. He fell backward against the cabin wall, his eyes wide with shock. You can't." He gasped. "I can," Carmen replied. "And I did." She walked up the porch steps and knelt beside the dying man. "For what it's worth," she said, "Grant was never weak. He was just raised by someone who confused cruelty with strength." Silas tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. He died with his eyes open, staring at the woman who had just become his son's widow. Carmen was dragging Silas's body inside the cabin when she heard vehicles coming up the mountain road. She moved to a window and saw the SUV, followed by 2 other cars. Grant had brought backup. Carmen counted the men as they deployed around the clearing. 6 total, including Grant. All armed, all moving with the coordination of people who had done this before. "Carmen!" Grant's voice echoed across the clearing. "I know you're in there." Carmen checked her weapons. The pistol she had used on Silas, plus 2 more guns and extra ammunition from her storage unit supplies. It would have to be enough. "Let the girl go," Grant shouted. "This is between us." Carmen almost smiled. Grant still thought she had kidnapped Noah's daughter. The misdirection had worked perfectly. She called back through the cabin window. "Come up here, Grant. Let's talk." "Not until you release Emma." "I don't have Emma." Silence from the clearing. Carmen could imagine Grant conferring with his hired killers, trying to figure out what game she was playing. "Then where is she?" Grant finally called. "Somewhere safe," Carmen replied, "which is more than I can say for you." Carmen moved to the back of the cabin and started her preparations. She had maybe 10 minutes before they worked up the courage to assault the building. She found Silas's gun collection in a closet, 3 hunting rifles, and a shotgun, plus boxes of ammunition. She also found something more interesting: plastic jerry cans of gasoline, probably for a generator. Carmen smiled. Grant wanted fire? She would give him fire. She soaked the cabin's interior with gasoline, focusing on the walls and floor. The old wood would burn fast and hot. Then she positioned Silas's body in the living room and scattered his guns around like he had been preparing for a fight. When the investigators found the scene later, it would look like an old man had died defending his cabin from intruders. "Carmen!" Grant's voice was closer now. "We're coming up." "No, you're not." Carmen called back. She lit a match and dropped it in the puddle of gasoline by the front door. The flames spread across the floor with a whoosh of superheated air. Carmen moved to the back door and waited. The cabin was already filling with smoke, and she could hear the fire spreading through the walls. In 2 minutes, this place would be an inferno. The front door exploded inward, and armed men poured into the burning cabin. Carmen slipped out the back door and circled around the building, using the smoke and chaos as cover. She found Grant cowering behind his SUV, his face pale with terror. "Hello, husband," Carmen said, pressing her pistol against the back of his head. Grant went rigid. "Carmen, disappointed to see me alive." "Where's Emma Price?" "Safe. I never touched her. That was just to keep you and your friends busy while I dealt with your father." Grant turned his head slightly. "Is he?" "Dead. Shot twice in the chest. Very quick, very clean." Grant started crying. Despite everything Silas had done, the old man was still his father. "Why?" Grant sobbed. "Because he convinced his weak son to try to murder me," Carmen replied. "Because he thought killing me would make you strong." The cabin was fully engulfed now, flames reaching toward the darkening sky. Carmen could hear Grant's hired killers shouting inside the building, trying to escape the fire. "Did it work?" Carmen asked. "Do you feel strong now?" Grant was crying too hard to answer. Carmen pressed the gun harder against his skull. "I asked you a question." "No," Grant whispered. "I feel like a monster." "Good. You should." Carmen heard footsteps behind her and spun around. One of the hired killers had escaped the cabin and was raising his rifle. Carmen shot him twice before he could aim. "We need to go," she said to Grant. "Where?" "Away from here before the rest of them get organized." Carmen dragged Grant to her car and pushed him into the passenger seat. As they drove away from the burning cabin, she could see more men emerging from the smoke, coughing and disoriented. "They'll come after us," Grant said. "Let them try." Carmen drove down the mountain road with controlled speed. Behind them, the cabin burned like a signal fire against the night sky. "What happens now?" Grant asked. Carmen considered the question. Grant had betrayed her, tried to have her killed, gotten his father and several other men killed in the process. By any reasonable measure, he deserved to die. But looking at him now broken, sobbing, destroyed by the consequences of his own choices, Carmen felt something she hadn't expected: pity. "Now you disappear," she said. "Change your name, move to another state, start over. If I ever see you again, I'll kill you." Grant nodded miserably. "What about you?" "I'm already gone." Carmen stopped the car at the bottom of the mountain, at the junction where the cabin road met the highway. She got out and walked around to Grant's side. "Get out." Grant climbed out of the car on unsteady legs. "There's a bus station 10 miles that way," Carmen pointed east. Start walking." Grant looked at his wife one last time. In the darkness, she was barely visible, just a shadow with eyes that reflected no light. "Carmen," he said, "I'm sorry. For everything. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but—" "You're right," Carmen replied. "It doesn't mean anything." Grant nodded and started walking down the dark highway. Carmen watched until he disappeared into the night. Then she got back in her car and drove in the opposite direction. Behind her, the mountain burned. The Flagstaff Daily Sun ran the story on page 3. "Storage facility fire kills 3." The article described how a suspected gas leak had caused an explosion at a self-storage complex on the outskirts of town. 3 bodies had been found in the wreckage, burned beyond recognition. The fire marshal ruled it an accident. 2 days later, the same paper reported a separate incident. Cabin fire claims local man. Silas Hale, 72, had died in a fire at his hunting cabin in the mountains. Investigators found evidence that intruders had broken into the cabin before the fire started. The death was ruled a homicide, but no suspects were identified. Grant Hale was reported missing by his employer when he failed to show up for work. His car was found abandoned at a bus station in Albuquerque. Police assumed he had left voluntarily, possibly fleeing gambling debts or other personal problems. Carmen Hale was never mentioned in any of the reports. 3 weeks after the fires, Noah Price received a postcard from Seattle. No message, just a picture of the Space Needle. He threw it away without showing it to his daughter. Riley Vega got a similar postcard from Portland. She kept it on her desk for a week, then threw it away too. Carmen's house in Flagstaff sat empty for 2 months before a real estate company put it up for sale. The neighbors assumed she had left town after her husband's disappearance. No one asked too many questions. The woman who had been Carmen Hale drove north until she reached the Canadian border, then west until she found a small town on the coast where no one knew her name. She rented a cottage overlooking the ocean and spent her days walking on the beach, thinking about the life she had left behind. She had no regrets about Silas or the hired killers. They had chosen their path when they decided to murder her for money. Self-defense was not a moral complication. Grant was different. He had been weak rather than evil, manipulated by a father who had never loved him properly. In another life, they might have found happiness together. 2 damaged people learning to trust each other. But Grant had chosen betrayal over honesty, murder over communication. He had looked at 9 years of marriage and decided his wife should die rather than live. Some choices could not be forgiven. Carmen walked the beach every morning and evening, letting the sound of waves wash away the memories of blood and fire. She was 40 years old, financially secure, and free from the complications of her old life. She could be anyone she wanted now. Sometimes she thought about Noah's daughter, safe and alive because Carmen had been willing to kill for her. Sometimes she thought about Riley building a new career in a world that didn't value her military skills. Sometimes she thought about Grant, wandering through a life he no longer recognized. Mostly, she thought about the future, about the woman she might become in this new place, among people who would never know what she was capable of. The past was gone, burned away in the fire she had set. What remained was silence, vast and clean as the ocean that stretched beyond the horizon. Carmen had always been good at starting over. It was one of her most useful skills on a Tuesday morning 6 months after leaving Flagstaff. She was drinking coffee on her cottage porch when a man approached along the beach. He was about her age, wearing running clothes, with kind eyes and an easy smile. "Morning," he called as he jogged past. "Morning," Carmen replied. The man slowed to a walk. "I don't think we've met. I'm David. I live in the blue house down the beach." "Carmen," she said automatically, then caught herself. That name belonged to someone else now, someone who was dead and buried. "Actually, it's Kate. Kate Patterson." David smiled. "Nice to meet you, Kate. You're new to the area." "A few months now. How do you like it?" Kate looked out at the ocean, at the endless possibility of water meeting sky. "It's perfect," she said, And for the first time in years, she meant it. The woman who had been Carmen Hale was gone. The woman who was Kate Patterson was just beginning. She had forgiven no one, and she had left no loose ends. The silence was finally complete.